Please take your seats. Dear friends, our today's event is called Association Agreement, a Summer Without Reforms. Today we are going to speak about the implementation of obligations in the framework of Association Agreement concerning environment, and we are DiXi Group, a project that is financed by European community with our these are NGOs and partners, experts, who together with us monitor the implementation of association agreement by Ukraine in the sphere of energy and environment, and inform experts and community about what is going on in the area of energy reforms. This is a hot topic today. And heating season is not started, but it is really soon. And the preparation to the season is really important, and the general positions of our country in front of this yearly duty. We are going to discuss these issues today. Our experts are here with us. These are Tetyana Boiko, OPORA, Valentyna, Belyakova, European and European Association, Svitlana Golikova, TransEnergoConsulting, Nitsovych, DiXi Group, and Natalia Andrusevych, Society and Environment Center. So I give the floor to our experts. Please be brief, 5-7 minutes each. And the main areas, the main issues in the energy sector, in the sector of reforms. While Ukrainians were on holidays, they had some time in summer. What was going on during this time, during these summer months? I give the floor to Nitsovych, DiXi Group. Thank you very much. Firstly, it's a pleasure for me to be here in this gender unbalanced situation, in this panel, and I would like to focus that I would like to focus on the association agreement concerning energy and how it influences heating season this year. I would like to thank Leonid Unigovskyi, who is ill at the moment and was not able to take part in our event a year ago. We were proud of the achievements in the gas sector, that progressive law is adopted and bylaws are adopted, regulations are adopted, and we will have effective gas market. But in a year, we see that those trends, those reforms, and the vision that was included in the law does not work full scale. And we tried to find out why. In a year, there is no acceleration in this direction. Of course, a lot depends on the Supreme Council, and the Parliament for half a year was working but wasn't able to review draft law of the last package that had to harmonize legislation of Ukraine with the provisions on the gas market, and the terminology and the influence on some rules. At the same time, my colleagues maybe also will tell you about it. We do not have legislation on independent regulator, and this is one of the main obstacles. So to have an open market, we should have proper regulator. Otherwise, we lose instruments to influence monopolies. Those enterprises that transport and distribute gas, and also we lose influence on some violations of suppliers. Also, the issue about networks. So the main lines and the distribution lines, the situation is not clear whether the new tariff methodology will work properly to transport in the internal markets, and also it is for importers and for those who extract gas. The methodology entry-exit is not used now. And as to distribution lines, it is not clear how these networks that are partly privatized will be used on lease or concession. We should identify the meaning of, to identify property rights and the consumers, the households, population, they get a bill for gas directly from supply and the company that distribute the gas. And without it, we cannot speak about competition. And thirdly, the issue that is not regulated properly is Naftogaz. In the middle of summer, the government adopted a plan of restructuring of Naftogaz. It's the transport function and the storage function should be separated from the supply function, and this document was made public with some delay. That gives grounds to doubt that the work was carried out properly, and also the precondition to transfer assets to new enterprises that will be created. The Stockholm arbitrage should be completed between Gazprom and Naftogaz, and this is the condition, external condition, and it doesn't depend on Naftogaz, and this can delay further the process of distribution, and it can complicate the development of the market. So these are the main things that I wanted to draw your attention to. And of course, there are some obstacles for independent suppliers, and they voiced them repeatedly. Naftogaz is a player in the market. It should compete for consumers, and at the same time, it remains as an instrument of realization of state policy. So until April next year, they have obligations to supply gas as a guarantee supplier to consumers and heat generation, and also government provides other obligations as the accumulation of 17 cubic meters, not 14, and the idea of a state property fund to make Naftogaz responsible to provide gas to the storage facilities, and this is not market practice, and this is double nature of Naftogaz does not allow it to understand that they are the players of the market, not just a part of state machine, and they should adhere to the rules and increase competition in the market. Thank you, Roman. As I noted before, in the framework of our project, different target groups worked, and now I give the floor to Svitlana Golikova, who worked in the framework of Electro-Energy Group and nuclear safety. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you firstly for the invitation. This is a pleasant audience, and it was really pleasant to work with them. And we prepared the report and monitoring on the implementation of European obligations, and some aspects were outside our research. Such important aspects, the Rotterdam Plus. We did not include this in our work, and we focused our attention on implementation of association agreement and implementation of directives 72, and it said that Ukraine had to adopt and law on regulator and law on electricity market. Roman told about regulatory law. I believe it has political influence more than organizational and legal. And I won't say that there is a struggle, a fight, but it looks like political struggle. And between political forces, not the content of the work of the Commission, but organizational component, who will appoint and what they will be elected, the existing committee, and when the new Commission arrives. And also there are many problems of technical nature on electricity market law, and I believe that you know that one law exists that doesn't work, and it had to work starting last year. But unfortunately, this is a legal nonsense. There is law that is not implemented, and no one is responsible for this. Supreme Council had to cancel it if it's not active. But in this law, there are requirements of third energy package. It more corresponds to second package, but there is no political will in order to cancel the law that does not work. But it exists. And also there are some developments made by a regulatory commission and the ministry to implement obligation. There is a positive step. One big plus. The work is started to provide the line starting from 70 kilowatt to 20, and it will provide economy in the future. It will decrease the losses. This is new configuration and adherence to European standard of distribution. Not supply, but distribution of low voltage. For it will improve the prospects to connect to the networks, to meter, and it improves automatization, and it good grounds for the consumers to transfer to smart grids and to use meters, and it should promote this approach. Also, positive moment I would like to tell you about is the work is started on the law. Not even started, it should have been done. This is the settlements in the electricity market. The previous law ended its activity, but there is accumulation of debt, and for half year we have an imbalance of about 1 billion hryvnias. 27 billion, this is the indebtedness before the market from the side of consumers, and 28 billion, this is indebtedness before the producers, except green energy producers. 100 settlement with green energy producers. So we should promote reforms in the energy market, and the new law will help us in this. One more issue that is important is the issue of system operator Ukrenergo. Unfortunately, we are far from European standards of the work of system operator, but Ukrenergo started its work on audit of financial reports, and the company Deloitte and Touche carried out this audit, and there is information on the site, the open data about it, and there are investment plans. Recently, half months ago, investment project for 2017 was published, and financial reports are submitted for half year. And what is lacking? One leading document in the sphere of transfer of electric energy is the code of grids. There's a lot to speak about this code. We have 5 or 6 different drafts, but they are not adopted yet according to European standards. Each year, system operator should propose to all the consumers, to all generation enterprises and business, to review and to tell about the problems of the use of grids. One of them is connection to the grids, and this code of grid does not exist. The work is carried out by the Commission on Energy Market, but we do not see the results that we need. And lastly, last but not the least, is the problem of reliability of our energy system. The press should pay attention to this. On the 22nd of August, the joint system was Belarus, Baltic states, and Russia for 40 years. The frequency was 49 and 1 hertz, and the system worked in manual mode. So automation was out of order. We supported the system, and we supported it due to high qualification of our specialists, but reserve capabilities, they were not working, and dispatcher said that it was some problems were in Russia, and the electric station in Urals had some problems, and we had to deal with the situation with our own resources, and no one estimated the cost of this fault or this incident in the system. And this is one of the examples that the system, Ukrainian system, should be connected and should be included in the European energy system, where such things could happen, but if they happen, they are calculated economically who should pay. And of course, I will answer questions further. Thank you. Thank you, Svitlana.
It's a good point which we made at the end of our discussion. Who owns to whom and who should pay what and to whom. Recently, there was a conference devoted to the environment, and I invite Ms. Natalia Andrusevych, who is head of the working group on environment and renewable energies. Anton actually mentioned about the Ukraine's case, and environment is a big part of the association agreement in general dimension, and in sectoral chapters devoted to DCFTA, and in special schedule devoted to the regulations, 29 the regulations which Ukraine should implement. Of course, we cannot cover 29 directives, and so we decided to focus on 9 directives dealing with the air quality, industrial pollutions, birds protection, and some others. Unfortunately, none of the reforms which were started upon signing the association agreement in the area of environment was not implemented fully. Looking at the period that passed from May through autumn, through August this year, we could mention Euro-integrational projects and ratification of Paris Agreement. Due to the new cabinet of ministers and interest of some bureaucrats to promote environmental reforms, we managed to pass some good decisions. But nevertheless, I would like to point out to problem issues. Probably you know that currently we are in process of upgrading our strategy and then environmental policy in general. The first strategy, the first draft strategy was communicated to us, and we found a lot of problems. The biggest problem is that we do not have the target indicators, except 10% of natural reserve fund by 2020. We would like to see the elements of environmental network. We would like to see the figure of investments to the environmental sphere. Also, we did not see application of such principles as the those who produce pollutions, they should pay, that the principle of warning, etc. Also, the environmental impact assessment and the baseline environmental study issues. We had to implement our commitment to implement the environmental impact assessment long ago, almost 2 years ago. And only now we are at the final stage of submitting this draft laws to the parliament. There are some issues in those bills which should be resolved because they are related to the urban development, construction activities, etc. One more issue which attracts our attention. Currently, the national plan for decreasing emissions from mines and mining production complex is under development. Unfortunately, that plan that was developed last year was not passed. But now we found out that the sector itself had produced some sort of the national plan of emissions. We have to analyze it carefully to understand whether they comply fully with the directive, European directive. I would like to point out to a small progress in the quality of air. This year we made the first step to implementation of the European directive. As for protection of birds, specifically about special protected sites for birds. We are lagging behind and we are doing nothing actually. The new draft laws aimed at protection of birds would not allow us to stick with this commitment made by Ukraine. Besides what I already mentioned, we believe that the beginning of new academic year will allow the Parliament to find some solutions. Also, we hope that they will make upgraded plan to implementation of the association agreement. As far as I know, the integration office had discussions with the broad public and with the European partners, but unfortunately it was not passed. I invite you to pay attention at the implementation plans for each directive. Unfortunately, the problem is that those implementation plans would not allow us to implement the directives fully. And we should pay attention and try to resolve the issue. Natalia, thank you. I invite to the microphone Tetyana Boiko, the expert of our working group devoted to social and energy issues. Dear colleagues, Ukrainian made a lot of commitments, not just to the European Union, but also to the IMF and some other donors. And there is a number of documents, number of instruments which say that alongside with the market tariffs, market prices on energy and fuels, Ukraine has to strengthen social protection measures. So I will say a couple of words about philosophy of that commitments. in the energy efficiency sphere in parallel with the raised gas prices. We made a commitment to ensure commercial measuring of consumed energy, ensure energy saving, and provide assistance in energy saving. Also, we had to develop a social policy which would protect the least capable citizens. So what we managed to do during the summer? There were a lot of talks, much lesser than actions. Also, we observed a huge number of populist promises made, especially against the background of documents passed by the parliament. So in the area of legislation, we have the governmental bill about energy efficiency of residential buildings, and the parliamentary bill about energy efficiency. And as far as I know, the parliamentary committee would review the energy efficiency of buildings bill. It seems this is a victory, but actually similar bills have been being submitted to the parliament for the last 5 years. That's why we can only hope that this year they will be taken for scrutiny by the parliament. The energy-saving measures. As of today, we have only one state program of so-called warm loans. This year, almost 900 million hryvnia were allocated for the program, but the demand from people appeared to be much higher, and the state ran out of all that money for the program by July. Then there was a sitting of the government, and they added 100 million hryvnia. Now we have September, but this resolution of the Cabinet of Ministers is not published. The current program is blocked because they have no money, and nobody saw that the resolution of the cabinet which allocates 100 million hryvnia. It seems to us, our information proves that new money could not be allocated. They were planned to be taken from the state program on condominium, and to take money from the state program on boilers. But actually that money could not be taken. That's my personal understanding. What we can say, that state program for physical persons is suspended. The loans for condominium for energy saving is still active, and the state program of loans, privileged loans for those who wish to install new boilers is also it remains active. But everybody keeps saying that the program of so-called warm loans, it is a temporary measure, and we need some more permanent mechanism. And in July this year, the concept of the energy efficiency fund was presented. The action plan had to be developed within a month. And the document which was approved, it's just a set of nice statements. Besides that concept, neither of the official decisions mandatory for implementation was not made. We do not know whether any measures are planned. We do not know whether the legislation is amended. We do not know whether some measures should be implemented via bylaws, etc. The next achievement is that the standards for energy management and a set of technical regulations in the area of labeling production were passed. As for the system of subsidies, of course it is better than the previous one, but nevertheless, the situation is more serious than it looks at the first glance. Unfortunately, the government pays more attention to subsidies than to the energy-saving measures. Those who get subsidy, they are not interested in energy saving. Unfortunately, we keep hearing just statements. Vice Prime Minister Rozenko, Vice Prime Minister Zubko. We heard several statements made by the gentleman. We would monetize the parts of subsidies, but in mid-August, the resolution was made that all saved residuals of subsidies were taken. So the residuals of subsidies will go back to the budget. Although these are not money, these are just money on paper. So for us, the main message is that people will have no incentives for energy saving. Probably later, the government will pass some energy saving documents, but from autumn we will have big numbers of people who will apply for subsidies without no incentives to strengthen the energy saving operations. So our next reporter will be Mr. Gennadiy Ryabtsev from Ukernafta company. I would like to give the floor to you. all Ukrainians are experts in tariffs, in oil prices, and in football.
So the obligations in the sphere of energy and environment and other areas of our survey, those obligations that concern oil products, they are long-term. The creation of minimum of supply of oil is planned in the future, and it is the negative thing because our legislators believe that they can postpone in this area and they can disregard this issue. But the creation of storage of oil products, it requires from Ukraine not only buying of 2 million tons of of products and also creation of infrastructure. And this infrastructure cannot be built in half a year or in a year. If we analyze all the actions of the government that is done in this direction and in the area of creation of monitoring system of quality of oil products and also the creation of proper means and measures in the realization of measures to decrease the emission of harmful substances in the air, we see that all these actions are reduced to so-called products of policy, not to the results. The products of policy is the development of different projects, draft programs and draft laws, the creation of different working groups, the preparation of some projects of legislative acts and so on and so forth. So the majority of tasks that are included in the plan of actions of the Ministry of Energy and Coal Industry for 2016, they are not tasks as they are identified by the legislative documents and strategic planning. They are not the documents like this. 16 out of 17 of tasks, this is the producing of some projects without real implementation to solve some problems. That is under international obligations. Also creation of interdepartmental working groups to implement the obligations. They do not include experts who can solve problems, and it leads to the fact that the plans of implementation of directives of the European Union, they not only in the sphere of oil and oil products, but also on the whole in the energy sphere, in the environmental sphere, so people do not know special terminology and they are not professionals in the field. Concerning this, we have several plans of implementation, and also there are obligations, and they differ from those that are identified in the documents that Ukraine undertook to adhere to. And it concerns the directive that should limit the emission of liquid substances while transporting oil products from storage facilities to the stations, and also the directive concerning introduction of the mechanism of trade on emission trading, and also the directives concerning limitation of emission of harmful substances in the environment. to understand what I'm talking about in the documents like this, no one can find out what is mobile container, what it is. So official translation adopted by the Ministry of Justice. This is the fuel transporter. And if oil is called oil products and oil products are called oil, so there is difference in terminology. So so we are speaking about different things, and we should and about the working groups. So some decisions were adopted by previous governments, and it is, and also the plans of the energy and coal industry. They so there is a strategy, and there are two drafts prepared by the Institute of Strategic Research, and another is prepared by Razumkov Center with international experts, including those who are present here today. And these projects, they were discussed and coordinated with the representatives of European energy community. But some unknown experts prepare new energy strategy of Ukraine. If we look at technical tasks and the project that we have in our, we can see that the tasks that are set contradict international obligations of Ukraine in the sphere of oil and oil products and in environmental sphere, because there are some things such as development of coal industry that contradict the strategy, ecology strategy that was adopted and that has the status of law, and also those directives that we should adhere to. And it means that, summing up, the summer passed in my field that I analyzed without reforms. And everything is postponed further and further. Some new working groups are created, some new drafts are prepared, but government do not go further to implementation of these documents, and we should say that Ukraine should adhere to its obligations and the government should implement reforms, and how the institutes of civil society should react, that there should be proper results of implementation. I would like to give the floor to Ms. Belyakova, who works in the group that sums up the work of other groups. Business climate, it is called.
The business climate is influenced by the situation in other in other sectors, and which are analyzed by the working groups. I would like to add a couple of positive things, although I will start from negative things. Non-passage of the law on electricity market and on the regulator is rather harmful, because they should have the biggest impact on the influence of business, on the development of business climate in Ukraine. But now, a positive statement. During summer, some steps were made in business climate. First of all, the passage of the law on information disclosure by energy companies. It was passed in first reading, and the final law will allow broad public to see whether energy companies pay taxes and how much do they pay. Also, the Ministry of Coal and Energy was seen by the legislators' main implementers. Also, the companies will mandatorily do this assessment. The law on cyber security in Ukraine got positive opinion and was discussed in the parliament. Also, we have witnessed beginning of the witness project between EU and Ukraine, where Lithuania and Germany will provide Ukraine with assistance in approximation of Ukrainian legislation to the EU in institutional aspects. Also, we observed the introduction of the one-shop windows in customs points at the border for all the cargoes passing the state border. Also, one of the important measures was that ProZorro system started to function in full scope, and Prime Minister Groisman assisted in creation of the Office of Foreign Investments, which involves leading experts, and we hope that this will positively influence the business climate development in Ukraine. And I hope that Verkhovna Rada will allow us to translate more positive news to you. At this point, I would like to invite the experts in this room to express your opinions or ask questions. I invite ministry representatives to add comments. Okay. In the meanwhile, maybe you have questions to our presenters. Good. We have one question. Andrei Megan, Concord Consulting Firm. You mentioned that we do not implement some directives, but we have the problems with modernization. We have huge wear of our equipment, which is depreciated, and what can we do with low voltages, etc., with the leaking heating pipes, etc. Of course, when we discuss the exclusively technical plans, then lower the lower voltage of at a level of 127 volts is a good step towards stabilization of our lines and towards more stable work, sustainable work of our electricity system at winter. Of course, this is our big concern, especially before beginning of the winter, which might be severe. Speaking about gas sector, our system is now well tuned to the self-supplies of gas. That is, our main orientation is to have sufficient gas and gas storages to survive during winter. The second important aspect is whether our regulator will be truly independent and able to observe how the operators of gas distribution networks getting payments from population would be able to modernize the network. As for my part, in the past, all heating plants used coal and gas. This year, we observe how majority of them shifted to heavy oil, and thus they prevented themselves from disruptions in supplies of coal. And when we see the stock of coal in Tripilla heating plant and taking into account the long-term forecast of American synopticists, we may hope that we will pass successfully via the winter season. That is, my message is as follows. Even without interference of the government, the private companies which supply electricity and heating to our houses, they are ready to survive through winter without huge losses. But of course, in case of any emergencies, we won't be able to survive as for water supply systems, during one of our inspections, I observed how the repair crew tried to change the pipe, and they could not find the pipe under the ground, and there was just a piece of corroded iron and with a lot of leakages. This clearly demonstrates why all big programs related to cleaning of water in all our big cities are not successful. Due to that bad pipes, the water would not be clean when it is supplied to the houses, which again suggests that efforts of the private companies, only the efforts of private companies are not enough to improve the situation. Sukhina Oksana, the U.S. Embassy in Ukraine. I think my question is about energy efficiency fund. For implementation of the monetization of residual subsidies. The plans about monetization are postponed now. The rhetoric is new. But the question is as follows: whether we need any additional legislation, or this is regulated by the Cabinet of Ministers resolution. The concept which was presented and developed by McKinsey company, it does not provide for any specific instruments. There was a set of options in the concept which did not describe the mechanism, how the fund would function. I believe that this fund should be able to avoid a long-term cheap credits. The current program compensates a bigger part of the body loan, while the interest rates remain the big problem. The long-term perspective is a big problem. A lot of allocation, a lot of programs from the state budget are aimed at are planned within 1 year, not for several years, because the budget money allocated just for 1 year. That's why I believe that the objective of that fund should be a long-term, cheap borrowing. For the state to make this funding or these loans cheap, there should be a budgeting process changed. There should be amendments to the budgetary code, and the budget should be passed for several years, not just for 1 year. As for the monetization of the residual subsidies, I believe this could be regulated by the Cabinet of Ministers, that is repeal resolution number 20. But here again we come to the issue of real money. Vice Prime Minister Zubko suggests there should be 30 million hryvnia in cash to launch relations between energy companies in reality, not in a form of financial clearing. So the issue is more complicated than just to pass one resolution establishing the energy saving fund. I would like to add, here is one more problem. Our government officials quite often involve international organizations or international companies to solution of problems. And the problem is that those international companies, they prepare just concepts. When we look at the policy brief, which are concepts which sets major problems, underlying problems. There should be green book, and there should be green paper and then white paper. But the majority of so-called international, the qualification of the so-called international experts is not enough for the white paper and green paper. They are able to produce the concept. For example, recently I read such the concept paper for Ukraine from one company, advisory company. On page 132, I found the country Bangladesh instead of Ukraine. And I asked myself whether they are efficient, because it's so easy to take money for a job in the third country, but to offer something valuable to this third country, it's not so easy. There are predictions for this autumn that we will have 9 million of households who would apply for subsidies, and you can just imagine that our monetary base would grow 10 times. In the EU countries, there is up to 15% of households which get subsidies. In Ukraine, the figure had increased 1/3 and is approaching to 1/2 of households. So we should focus just a part of these resources on energy saving to cut down the part of this subsidy receivers. And so under these conditions, direct monetization of the subsidies is nonsense. I would like to add why they write just concepts, because Ukraine, no expert could write down the bill or draft law for the parliament. And now about monetization. You mentioned that there is no need in special legislation to monetize services. I was surprised to hear this. Without meters which register consumption, I cannot understand how monetization could happen, because without obligatory metering, you cannot I mentioned that the draft law on metering should be passed first. The law had been registered several times, and this is the key law that should be passed. What you plan to do to pass this law during current session of the parliament? A reanimation package of reform plans to held informational and advocacy campaign to support passage of the most important laws. In parallel, we work with the national regulators. They initiated to review investment programs of the licensed companies and to insert obligatory provision about meters in all of them. And nevertheless, we observe a lot of in this area. For example, they managed to reach the figure of 70% metering of heating. Their target figure is 86%, and I think that it's good. I think the bigger problems are in gas sector, but I won't stop on this now. You mentioned that you are international expert, and again, and immediately confirmed the low efficiency of your future work. The law or the bill, it's not the policy instrument, but the policy instruments. As international expert, you may recommend to raise responsibility for throwing garbage into the street. And you can raise this responsibility at the level of local authorities, at the level of municipal council, or the cabinet of ministers, or Ministry of Interior, or the law could be passed by the parliament. So you may say that in white paper you should list the instruments, how to force people, how to encourage people, how to raise public awareness, how to motivate people. We know what to do, even without international experts. But how to do this? I know there is good experience in energy efficiency area in the Baltic countries, in Scandinavian countries, in Denmark, in Norway. But except the statement that we have to raise energy efficiency, nobody can advise us. That's my personal view as the professor in public administration. Let's stop at this point because we will see each other on quarterly basis. I would like to thank to the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center, European Union for financial support, and I hope to see you soon.